I literally woke up one morning and my manager rang me from America and said, hey mate, have you looked at the back-end Spotify artists today? Like, have you just seen any of the stats on Feels Like Summer, which incidentally I released in 2019, so this is a few years later. It was just sort of sitting there on Spotify. I said no, and I went and have a look, and it is, done tens of thousands of streams in a very, very short period of time, like big spikes, sort of, off the scale. I've gone from singing a couple of songs drunk at the pub, my local pub where I was working as a chef, to going out to Los Angeles and going to professional recording studios, and people, most importantly, believing in you.
In the industry, there are stories, whether they're true, allegedly true, whatever, around Lewis Capaldi, and that his label was like, look, you've got to lose weight, you've got to lose the weight, you've got to wear your hair in a certain way, do the photo shoot like this.
Yeah.
And how did that play out for you?
I think I've done nearly 100 syncs over the last sort of 6-7 years.
100 syncs?
Yeah.
Wow. You can change one thing about the industry. You have one wish. What's the one thing you would change about the music industry?
Points. Master points for writers. Yeah, 100%.
End to end, how to write a global smash hit took you...
It actually took me about under half an hour, that one.
Okay, Sam, welcome to the Blind Talent Music Industry podcast. Let's get straight into it. Tell me, when did you first fall in love with music?
I think I must have been maybe 10 or 11, and I was living in Johannesburg at the time, and around that time, Paul Simon had released an album called Graceland, which in my eyes is like top 5 albums of all time. I just think it's an absolute work of genius. And there's a song on there called Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes, which I just became obsessed by because I wanted to know what it meant. And actually, to be honest, speaking honestly, I probably still don't quite know what it means, but I wanted to know then. And I fell in love with the sound of it, and then listen to the rest of the album.
I mean, that's a classic album, right? And so you were in South Africa at this point?
Yeah, it was just outside Johannesburg. Actually, it was in Pretoria, which is kind of near Joburg.
Because you hear different stories about South Africa, and I think South Africa is a really interesting musical landscape for some of the reasons you mentioned there. Some super talented musicians. I mean, I think about South Africa, and I actually think about an artist called Antwoord. Have you ever heard of? I think they're a group actually, but I remember getting that music sent to me, and it was very influenced by some of the tribal nature of South Africa and some of the weirdness of, obviously they've got a hell of a backstory, right?
Yeah,
South Africa.
Sure.
I remember hearing this and just thinking, this might be the weirdest shit I've ever heard in my life. And if you haven't heard Antwoord, I encourage you, anyone listening, go and have a listen to that. And if you think that that's normal, great. Drop me an email and then I'll politely ignore it because it means you're mental. But it's fantastic. And the reason why I say that is because obviously growing up in South Africa, there's clearly lots of different cultures going on, right? There's lots of different political challenges, let's just say. Did that add any context to the music you were listening to? Did you find you were maybe listening to, obviously Paul Simon on one side, but were you listening to anything that's a bit more local, perhaps, at the same time, or not really?
A lot of my dad's music collection, as well as the Paul Simon, the Graceland Paul Simon, it was made up of blues artists, soul, Motown. But the thing that I really loved about, and it's still to this day, is I think is sort of a thread through a lot of my own music is that community singing. Yeah, gospel, tribal, kind of like gang community singing, right? There's a group which is very famous, I'm sure you know, Ladysmith Blackmore Buzzer, who feature heavily in that record, particularly Graceland. There's a song there called Homeless, and I think those influences early, that those very first influences, the really early ones, even if you don't realise it's happened, they stick with you. They're right in the middle of you, I think, and I've taken that forever. I mean, I do a lot of. There's a lot of that in my records now, Yeah. And it's a really, like you said, it's a really like haunting, like beautiful sounds, that sort of choral, thing that they do. And when I was at school there, we had to Zulu, Xhosa, Swahili and Afrikaans, with like the three, every morning we'd actually sing the national anthem, Nkosi Sikeleli, and we'd do a verse in Zulu, a verse in Xhosa, a verse in Swahili, and a verse in Afrikaans.
Right.
It was like the first thing you did when you got to school. It's queue up in like pairs and like stand there and then like sing the national anthem, and off you went to your tutor or your form, whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think it was too early for me to say that, that was where it was my only influence, but it was the important one, I think.
It sounds like growing up in that environment, and it must be quite hard for anyone listening to grow up in that kind of environment. I mean, I don't know what time was that, sort of 90s.
It was a really interesting time for the country because it was right at the end of apartheid, essentially. But yeah, phenomenal country, steeped in trouble and beauty. Yes, it's dear to my heart. I mean, I was actually only there for about 3 or 4 years. But I remember it like.
And what time were you there from? So you were 11 at that point. When was you there from?
Well, Mark, I wouldn't want to give away my age.
Well, that's okay.
Any good mathematician in the.
Yeah.
I was there like 95, 96, 97, about that, around there, I think.
Okay, great. So, and look, you should never worry about your age. When I'm on this podcast, I'm like a Jurassic era, right? So, I've got people sort of like hunting for my fossils still, so it's all good. But I think the reason why I say that is because most musicians tend to form their musical tastes around those quite interesting years of between 10 and 14. I mean, I think there's like a science study around it. In fact, the age of 14 being that moment when you decide, do you know what, this is the music I really love, and you start to form your own identity. And the reason why I say that is because obviously you're a very, very accomplished songwriter, and we're going to get on to some of that amazing stuff that you've done and are doing still. And, look, billions of streams later, right, we're having this conversation. But I can't help feeling that had you been a writer at that point, how much that landscape might have influenced some of your music. And maybe it has done later on too. But just tell me a bit about, I mean, has it influenced your music, first of all, growing up there? Has it influenced it beyond your years there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think actually it was slightly after that as well. We came out to London, and I think actually, I'd argue that the other most influential person in my sort of musical upbringing was my best mate, a chap called Ross, and so I sort of come back from South Africa, 13 or whatever, and then I went to top school. Do you call it top school? Top school, high school here, and met Ross, and we were young kids at the time. And he was really into old school hip hop, right, soul, and R&B, and that was because of his sister, his big sister Claire, who used to play like, like Shola Amma and stuff in her bedroom. Right. So she'd be in her bedroom like getting ready, and we'd be getting ready for football training in his bedroom, and it was always blaring out of her bedroom, and he was obsessed with like old school hip hop and stuff. So I'd got this sort of like foundation from South Africa of this kind of, tribal, gospel-y kind of vibe. And then I met Ross, around that same sort of era, like you say, those sort of really important years when and then I think, I'd argue that those few years, like you're saying, were the years that my musical sort of palette and my taste was like made. Yeah. I mean, we used to sit on his garage and drink cider and steal cigarettes from his dad and listen to like Rakim and like KRS-One and like Tribe Called Quest and stuff like that. Like when we were like 13, 14. Right. In may I add, a really nice rural town in the countryside.
Hey, look, that's what I would expect. Actually, is that escapism of hip. I mean, KRS-One's actually pretty specialist. I mean, actually amazing, amazing too. So let's talk about. So maybe this is a bit of a naive view, and forgive me if this does sound like a naive view. In South Africa, were there music shops? Did it have any kind of Western influence, i.e., like an Our Price or HMV, or how would you buy music?
To be honest, I was so young, and it was pretty dangerous where we were. I think we actually very rarely went to shops, and that sounds bizarre, but we would very rarely like go to shops. But yes, there was, like Our Price or maybe HMV or the like. But one thing I always remember was, and even now, is that I remember that it was like they were consuming music. They were really late to the party, South Africa. So like Bon Jovi was still like massive in like like the late 90s. Obviously he was still he's Bon Jovi, but everything just seemed really, really dated there. Right. So the access to new music, obviously, is a different world then. I mean, it's not like we weren't online. You went on the internet downloading music. I wasn't. I was, So yes, I mean, my memories of that were just very dated. like you're in some sort of this weird time warp where which is why I think I was primarily influenced by my dad and my mum's collection, which is just old music, And
there's a comfort in that, right? And I have a few friends that have come up through South Africa, and most of their stories end with "Yes, indeed he died." Because it felt like every story, like every person I ever meet has got this story of a best friend dying, and we went out to a club and someone shot him. And it's like, right, okay, and that's a story now.
Yeah.
And so I was always, I guess, slightly, not naive is the wrong word, but I'm always obsessed with South Africa because it feels like just a strange place. It's got so many important historical moments within it. Now, I know podcast isn't about South Africa, but I think when we think now in 2024, 2025, 2026, what we're hearing is that there's a lot of fantastic pop music now coming out of South Africa. And I think that's something to really keep an eye on over the next period of time. North Africa, I was in part of that for a while. We launched a channel called Box Africa, which was essentially taking on Trace at the time, which was their big one. And I remember it just being gnarly to program music in Africa because it was so tribal. In certain countries, they didn't want you playing certain artists because they are a part of different tribe, and they would find it deeply offensive. And at the same point, we're having to pay people with brown envelopes in cash to get certain music videos. It was like mental trying to program a TV channel. So forgive me if I sound naive. I just can't understand Africa generally because it's just
a melting pot
wild west. So it leads me to that question. What was the first track that you remember buying?
Do you know what? It's very contradictory to everything I've just said, actually. But do you know what's even slightly more embarrassing? I remember the first track that was bought for me. Well, it was a cassette tape.
Okay.
And it was bought for me by our plumber. There was this chap called Derek, lovely bloke. And we had these long story. We had bad plumbing problems, funny enough. And Derek used to come around and he bought me for my, I'm going to say 12s, but don't quote me. He bought me Wannabe by the Spice Girls single on a cassette because he thought I might like it.
Right. Well, maybe you just gave off a Spice Girls kind of vibe.
Maybe I did like it. What can I say?
What spice would you have been out of interest?
That's a good one. I would have been... Oh, that's a really tough one. I reckon I'd probably be Sporty Spice.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
She's a legend.
What was Mel B's one? Angry Spice? No, what was she?
Angry Spice. Scary.
Scary Spice.
Yeah, she was scary.
I probably would have been Scary Spice with a bit of Mel C Sporty in there.
Like it.
Angry Sporty Spice. There we
Hybrid
go.
Spice.
Hybrid Spice. Old Spice, actually, these days. Yeah. Just Old Spice. And for anyone listening that doesn't understand what Old Spice is, it was a really old aftershave. Which basically means I'm kind of old. So let's get on to the next part. So the music industry it's not like any other industry out there, right? It's not quite the same as working in Asda. So what drew you to the music industry?
I started relatively late in music. I only sat down at a piano for the first time when I was 18, I think. So it's, I guess semi-late. Not that it's ever too late. And I was in a college band. I was in a pop rock band, that we'd go out and I was in a covers band, and I was just sort of, I'd sort of fallen into singing at the piano in a pub that I used to work, where I taught myself how to play the piano, and I had a couple of friends that were sort of encouraged me to do a bit of singing, and one thing led to another, college band. And anyway, I took my college band into a local recording studio in Dorset, and I met a producer there called Owen, who still, many, many years on, still work with. But I met Owen, who was similar age to me, but, light years ahead in terms of what he'd done in the industry himself. He was a producer, writer, and music businessman, really. And I recorded an EP there with my mates. And I learned a load about him. I learned a load about production. I sparked up a relationship with him. I'd then go and hang out at the studio because it was local to me. I'd go and make tea. I'd, sweep the floor. I'd sort of just make myself a bit of a nuisance. I remember once I did a really bad job at painting his studio doors for him. And he still reminds me of that regularly. I did a terrible job, honestly.
So was it a bit like a Mr. Miyagi Karate Kid moment where he was making you paint the walls to somehow improve your songwriting ability over time?
It was a bit like that. And,
you're gonna earn that vocal booth.
Yeah, for sure. But he was just I found them both of them, Owen and Lily, just both very inspiring people in what they'd done. And I built a relationship with them and just learned a load. And this is something that I talk about with, when people ask me, about, what's the one thing you should do, give me a good bit of advice. And, first and foremost, it's just to always be a sponge. And I was inspired by what they'd done, and I learned a lot off them in a relatively short period of time. I built a relationship with them, and then we started working together on a professional basis later when I wasn't in the band anymore, when I was writing my own music. And I think that's what I looked at what they'd done, and I was like, okay, so this is awesome. Like I love this. Like I love music. It turns out I can sing a bit, and I'm writing, and my songs are getting a bit better, and they're helping me do that. This is great. And they inspired me to sort of just go, all right, I want to do that actually.
When did you realise you had such a great voice? Like your voice has got this, again, all those references you're talking about here, I get it. I've been very, very grateful that you sent me some of your upcoming music. It's not out yet. And again, I can hear that gospel. I think I said to you, I can hear that in there. It's beautiful. And it kind of, I remember Billy Joel, River of Dreams, and like listening to those tracks and going,
great.
What is this? Like, what is this additional gospel in the back? Even Bone Thugs and Harmony, Crossroads, bam, 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 bam.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
All these amazing tracks. Later to be absolutely ruined by Blazing Squad, but that's an entirely different thing.
No comment.
But tell me a bit about when you, because we see this a little bit in Blind Talent, where an artist comes and they're so raw. They go, oh, like I've got a voice, and I had a very similar thing when I was at Channel 4. We interviewed Tom Grennan. I don't know if you know that story, but he was essentially didn't know he could sing and was just singing when almost was at a pub with mates, and he started singing, and they went, you can properly sing. And it was like, oh, can I? Okay, cool. And then sort of pursued it a little bit further. And before you know it, he picked up a guitar. And this is him telling me this. So he picked up a guitar and then was like, oh, well, I can kind of do some stuff. And started doing some shows. And then this raw talent, obviously Tom Grennan is like, next level now. Is that kind of what happened to yourself? You kind of stumbled into when my voice is good. Like, how did that bit happen?
There's many similarities. I remember the first time I ever opened my mouth to sing publicly, and it was actually in a pub.
Right.
I was a chef. I trained to be a chef, and my mate Jim. He was a really good piano player, and he was also a chef. And we had this kind of weird connection where there was a piano in the pub, and in between shifts when there was no one there, the doors would be locked, and we'd just noodle around the piano. And one night we got really, really drunk, and we had a bit of a lock-in at the pub. This is like back in the good old days when people could smoke in pubs and the doors were locked. Not that's a good thing. And like it was, the rules were, it was country in the countryside. The doors would lock and you'd be there till 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And we sang, or he played The Doors' "Light My Fire," and I sang it because I was drunk. And I remember afterwards he was like, "No, that's pretty decent," And that was just prior to me, joining.
So was that Dutch courage? As in, you wouldn't ordinarily go and just sing.
No.
It was you'd had a few too many Stellas and thought, I'll give this a bash.
100%. I'm certainly not naturally. I've sort of grown into it, I think, as the years have gone on. But I'm not naturally a front man. I'm not someone that is desperate for the limelight. I'm more about the sort of craft and the art of the writing of the song. And I love being on stage now. But then, petrified. So that was the first time I started singing sort of live, and yes, very similar to Tom Grennan's story, I sort of fell into it, did more of it, then came the college band, then came going into the studio, and then you get better. If you stick with something for long enough, you just get better at it. You're sponging, you're learning, you're like, oh, okay, that's how you do a vocal warm-up.
Is that a bit like the 10,000 hours idea?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. I'm so big on that, and I'm so passionate about that. Perseverance, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I think is so critical in anything, but particularly this industry, and learning and honing your craft and your skill, and yeah, I fell into it as the years went on. Before I know it, I'm putting out music with producers that were based in Los Angeles at this point. So I was going out to LA, and of course, as you can imagine, for a sort of early to mid 20-year-old guy, semi late into it, you get the bug. You get the bug, and I'm sure there's like parallels to a lot of the entertainment industry, but I've gone from singing a couple of songs drunk at the pub, my local pub where I was working as a chef, to going out to Los Angeles and going to professional recording studios, and people, most importantly, believing in you. You're like, no, we're gonna do this with you. We think you're good enough to do it, and then you start, then it moves into sort of imposter syndrome territory where you're sort of like,
yeah, of course,
how have I arrived at this point? And then the snowball's moving, and before you know it, you're like, okay, right, this is now my life and my industry, and here we are.
Right. And so you're in these studios with these producers, and you're taking that next level up, which is quite often what we see with artists. They kind of go hop, skip, and where are we going now? Yeah. It tends to be like that sometimes. Do you get a little bit at this point, like you say, you're still fairly fresh into a little bit of imposter syndrome? Who are these producers working with at the time? Who else were they working with? Because I always find that's the bit that if I was in your shoes, I'd be like, So they've worked with Adele, and they've worked with, and now they're working with me. Well, of course, that's, they've taken obviously a step up to work with me.
Yeah, sure.
But what your previously you were working with, who were they working with? Who were they with?
I mean, there are lots of like names.
I mean, you walk into these studios, you see the discs on the wall, and they're all kind of a big deal.
There's loads of names flying around. Yes, there was a lot of those gold discs. Like with however many records sold underneath, and there was a lot of just other wider success as well. And it's funny, like now, with absolutely no ego attached, I go into studios like that regularly. And it's just what actually happens is you learn that is really those things, those gold discs that are amazing, and kudos to anyone that's got one. But a lot of it is vanity, and I think that's something that I've learned as well going on. Like I actually, as much as I was blown away by it when I was younger and coming up, like now, it's like, yeah, can we write a good song? Like
I guess that's normal, right? I suppose it's exposure. The more you do stuff, the more.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I want a few more of them. I'm like, well, thank you.
Yeah. Like, I'm not suggesting 1 minute you would take it for granted, but I think you become more seasoned and you become more comfortable. And I think this is what we're always striving for with artists, isn't it? Is can they walk into a studio and feel like they belong there? And there is a bit of a stage. And that's what I want to get into. Really, is as a songwriter and performer. We're going to definitely talk about your monster hit, right? Because I think that's the first of many more to come. But before we get onto that, there's obviously a step towards that. So you start going to these songwriting sessions and you start to kind of hone your craft. And in those initial phases, were you conscious of things like the Sam Jack brand? Were you thinking about that stuff, or was it really just about the songs?
I think I was really lucky in that I've always been. And I am really, really lucky, and I have been always, for the main part, surrounded by people like the people I mentioned, Owen and Lily, particularly, who I've been with for such a long period of time through my journey, that always had an eye on that for me. And it's not always the case for artists. I mean, I think now more than ever, and you'll say as much, I'm sure, is that artists are becoming more and more responsible for those things themselves, or working with companies that can help them do it. And there's a good reason for that. Those things are very, very important. But I think like, if I was a manager and I had an artist and the artist was like, "Oh, I don't care about the colour of the thing, whatever, man," it's such a classic artist thing to do, because the majority of us don't think like that right now, or historically speaking, haven't really thought like that. A classic songwriter, or cliche as it may be, is someone that wants to write songs and is socking it to the man, doesn't care about what they look like, or they just want to write the songs and get their art.
Do you think
out,
that's true though? Like I find there's always a bit of a juxtaposition there that we don't care, fuck the man and fuck the police. Well, that's still a brand, right? Yeah, that's
true.
That's still a conscious choice.
Do you know, it's a really interesting thing actually, because I think now more than ever, real top artists are really dialing in on this sort of stuff. I mean, like marketing is just like imperative, isn't it? And I think if you work with the real cream of the crop, they've got their eyes on every aspect of their project. They know what their color palette is. They know the visual. They've got that down. They've got the logos. That they've got all these things down. I think the very, very best now in our climate, in our industry today, are all over that. And I'll be honest and say that's something that I've struggled with. I struggled for years, and I was very lucky that I had people with an eye on it for me, and they kind of guided me. But what I found was actually on a few occasions that what happens is that when you're sort of entrusting other people to look after those things for you, you kind of lose a bit of a sense of your identity sometimes. I mean, there were times when I'd be on stage at a showcase, a label showcase in and around London maybe, or in America or whatever, and I'd be wearing stuff that I was trying to wear to give myself a brand, to sort of make myself sort of stand out a bit. And actually, I just felt really uncomfortable and hated it. Yeah. But, I think it's...
Whose idea was that?
That actually came from management.
Right.
And with good reason. I mean, like we're talking about, they were trying to sort of help me, steer me into sort of, what are you? Visually, what are you? What is your brand? You've got a sound and you've got a voice, but what's your brand?
And at what point does that brand, because I know we're getting into it a little bit here, but I think this is really interesting for people that might be listening to this podcast, because I've heard stories, there's in the industry, there are stories, whether they're true, allegedly true, whatever, around Lewis Capaldi, and that his label was like, look, you've got to lose weight, you've got to lose the weight, you've got to wear your hair in a certain way, do the photo shoot like this. And, I've heard different stories from different people, and look, I can't verify or whatever any of these stories, but you hear these things, and then you think, I guess it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? We always talk about being photo ready, music video shoot ready. What we mean by that is, if you can cut down a little bit for a couple of weeks, trim it up, it'll look better.
Oh yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
But how much of that is in the industry, and how much of that did you experience from your side, where people are going, okay, look, do you know what? Come on. There's the brand, and then there's like the brand. There's other things, those uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. Maybe to some degree, you may be alluding to that a little bit there by wearing stuff that maybe isn't comfortable for you, or maybe it doesn't feel quite right for you. But good to kind of hear because it sounds like you're still on that, at this point, you're still on that journey towards where we're going. But how did that play out for you?
I mean, in my personal experience, because for the majority of my career, I've sort of worked on a sort of on an indie label, or via the independent model. So my team's always been really small, and I've had, I've worked with multiple smaller teams to build my overall team, and therefore I've never really had, big nasty label bosses breathing down my neck saying, you got to get in shape and do this and do that. I mean, I think that conversation now, like the sort of rhetoric behind that sort of stuff, is changing. I mean, I think, again, it's kind of your brand. Like, Lewis Capaldi isn't a Greek Adonis, but he's very funny, and he, and that was his brand for a long time. He was this, really funny, charismatic guy that sang emotional piano ballads, really. If Lewis Capaldi suddenly, I mean, I'm not suggesting that if Lewis Capaldi suddenly lost loads of weight and turned up looking like, Hercules, it would be a bad thing. But at the same time, is that an answerable question? I mean, I never really experienced it myself. I also would argue that, and this is, again, just opinion, but I feel like it's almost genre specific. That I think if you're like a pop artist and you're sort of going for that sort of broader commercial market, that sort of pop, easy accessible music, I think there's. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? I think maybe there's more onus on looking like you're on the front of a magazine if you're in the pop space than you are, let's say, in a grungy rock band.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and I do think we've heard it in the industry many times about pop bands and boy bands. I think it was well documented with the Take That documentary about not eating and kind of not being looked after too, right? They were just in one train onto the next train onto the next plane and carting around and not really looking after those things. And I do think you're absolutely right. I think things have changed, and then authenticity has come through the other end of this. So look, we're going to get onto loads more of that industry stuff, but I want to just stay focused on Sam Jack, the artist, because something pretty amazing happened, right? So you've come from South Africa, listening to Paul Simon. You've come through on your journey. You've got your crew, your family, as you call it, the people that you trust with your music career. You're starting to develop your brand and your story, and you're honing your skills. And then you come out and something great happens, right? So then artists are very rarely ready for this moment. So tell us a little bit about your milestone moment, or that moment where you're like, oh, okay, fuck.
Yeah.
Now what?
I mean, it was certainly, I mean, God, it's hard to describe in words, actually, without being melodramatic, about that time of my life for lots of reasons. I mean, I'd been, previous
Hold on,
to
an
this,
artist being melodramatic. Come on.
Whoa.
Oh, no.
In the years leading up to this amazing moment that I had with this song, I'd been doing lots of touring. I lived in the Netherlands for 3 or 4 months because I was touring so much in sort of Benelux. I was working in this management independent sort of model way. I was releasing music, but I was also working part time. I was sort of working agency work, so I'd work some weeks and some weeks I wouldn't, and it was that big juggle which majority of us artists understand. There's that sort of break point when you're grafting 60 hours a week in a restaurant and you're doing music. I mean, there were periods, not to digress, but there was periods when I remember one time I got off a plane from Amsterdam in Bristol, and I drove from the airport to a hotel where I was working, and the plane landed at 1:30 a.m. and I drove there about an hour, got there like 3-4 o'clock, and I slept in the car for 2 hours in the car parking lot, got up, put my uniform on, and then went and did the breakfast shift at the hotel. I mean, I was doing some obscene things to sort of, keep the music ticking. And don't ask me why, Mark. I don't know. It's absolutely stupid of me, really. And you know, like I was doing some obscene things to my body, putting myself through some serious stress to, like, you know, keep in the game. And then Feels Like Summer happened, and it happened, if I'm completely honest. I'd released a bunch of music, and I'd had a great time doing that, and you know, had built up a load of experience. But I was at a real crossroads before lockdown as well. I mean, I'd lost quite a big tour because of lockdown. I lost quite a bit of money because of lockdown, and I was at this sort of spot where I was like still working part time. And I was thinking, okay, now lockdown's happened. I genuinely don't know what I'm going to do now. Like, how am I going to get back on the releasing train? What should I do? You know, how can we work this? I was working in a restaurant, and in a period of, I'd say 72 hours, 4 days maybe. I quite literally woke up one morning, and my manager rang me from America and said, "Hey mate, have you looked at the back end Spotify artists today? Like, have you just seen any of the stats on Feels Like Summer?" Which incidentally I released in 2019, so this is a few years later. It was just sort of sitting there on Spotify. I said no, and I went and have a look, and it had, you know, done tens of thousands of streams in a very, very short period of time, like big spikes, sort of, you know, off the scale. And it was started in like Scandinavian countries, right? And within 3 days, it had done, I hardly remember after 3 days, but it had done a significant amount of streams, put it that way. And I remember, and I'll never forget it, I was working on the line as a chef. I was cooking away during service, and my phone vibrated in my pocket, and weren't supposed to have phones on shift. Because my executive head chef at the time was like real anti it, but I kept mine in my pocket anyway because I got to take care of business. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know this is going on, and I was a smoker at the time, really bad. Don't smoke anymore. And my phone vibrated, and I just had this really weird feeling that it was something to do with music. So I said to Chef, "Chef, do you mind if I just go for a quick cig?" And he was like, "Oh."
Did he just go, "Fuck"? Did he Gordon Ramsay the shit out of you?
He was a bit like that. Lovely. He's called James Yesty, absolute legend. James and Steve. And Rob as well. And I sort of said, "Oh, can I go for a quick smoke?" And they're like, "All right, have you got your jobs done?" I was like, "Yeah." Ran out the back, got my phone, and it was an email from a major record label saying, "Hi, we just noticed your song, blah, 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 we love it. Would you be interested in getting on a call?" And bearing in mind I had sort of independent deals before, and it was still a big deal for me. I was like, I was a major. I haven't had any interest from a major for years. I've done showcases before, but not of significant. They'd come to you moment. And I was like, all right, put that down. Finish my shift, get my phone to my manager, and he's like, yeah. Well, he's like, well, look, I'll reach out to them. He reaches out to them, and then all I could describe it as is a waterfall of emails arrive in my inbox from I mean, mentioning no names, but I don't need to mention any names. Every major record label there is, and their subsidiaries, just pop, all came in. When can we talk? When I talk, songs kicking off. Wow. Sadly, without taking this chat on a slightly darker path, but within those same few days, my dad passed away unexpectedly. So, as you can imagine, I'm at this job. I'm like, I'm going to talk to all these major record labels, and then dad passed away. I was in this really bizarre period where I was essentially like, planning my dad's funeral, grieving, and also had this amazingly exciting news that I've been working towards for about 8 years.
Right. Wow.
So I was sort of, what ended up happening was, as I was on this like massive high and this, the worst of lows, and then you end up sort of getting to this weird bit in the middle where you're just sort of floating around and not really understanding how to feel. But anyway, I went through the process. And yeah, in a very, very short period of time, the song, it charted around the world. So I was driving in a car and I heard, Radio 1 or Capital, whatever it was, go, come on the radio, and it was doing the top 40. I think it was Will Manning, actually. He was like, you don't know his face and you've never seen him before, but you definitely know his song. It's Samuel Jack in with, new in it, number 30. I think it entered at 32 or something. Right. New in at 32, Feels Like Summer, I'm just like driving the car back from the restaurant, just sort of going, this is a bizarre world we live in,
Yeah.
And it's obviously it's a longer story. I won't go into too much more detail, but yes, it was a period of, cataclysmic movement for my career, my personal life. I quit my job because I needed to be a full-time musician. I needed to be it then. I needed to be world class like tomorrow, you know. So it was. I felt like a sportsman that has sort of semi-retired and then come back out of
Were
retirement.
you Rocky Balboa?
I pretty much was. Yeah, I was the culinary and musical.
You were
Rocky
fighting in
Balboa.
the lower leagues, and suddenly,
and
what was it? Apollo Creed calls you up and says,
quite.
"Right,
And then
we're
you
interested
know-
in the Italian stallion."
And then you just chucked into this world where, fortunately, I've been doing it for so many years that I was confident. I felt good about music. I knew who I was musically. You know, I was lost in that front. But all of a sudden, I moved back to London. I'm, renting this little room in Dalston, and I'm, being picked up in a car in the morning and going off to meetings at the label, which I ended up signing to or licensing the song to. Taking these meetings. I'm going out for lunches, and and I'm being sort of swanned around, and and all this kind of stuff, and sort of looking around like this, looking all over the place, going, I don't understand this. This is just, And look, amazing experience. Despite the losing dad and all that kind of stuff, it was an amazing thing to have happened. I feel very, very lucky that I had a moment with that song. It's projected my career into a spot where I can now, I've got a bit of clout. I can go into rooms. Everyone knows that song, and the beautiful thing about that song is it comes back every year because it's always somewhere, Mark.
Yeah, and I feel like with a risk of you becoming the noddy holder of summer, where
I'll take it. I'm fine with that.
It's one of those things. But it's a very interesting story. And first of all, obviously, very sorry to hear about your dad. And those sort of events are oddly quite life affirming, and there's never a good time, right, for these things to happen. And I can't really imagine what that was like for you, because I just can't. Because we've seen artists get swept up into this quick, you're gone viral. And that's the mad thing. I remember I think you may have mentioned it before to me and said that, waking up to your phone suddenly pinging and going, oh, right. I mean, this is what every artist we speak to dreams of.
I know, right.
And it's this completely unpredictable thing where, well, I've written this great hook and I think it'd be great for the summer, or I've written this great hook and it's about love, and I can't believe it hasn't been picked up by TikTok, and people are writing songs for TikTok almost, right? They're writing these hooks. And you have it, and you have that moment happen, and it's slightly, unfortunately, clouded by other events. But you've gone from, chef to a major label, and that's kind of interesting because, I would say from the fire to the frying pan, I think probably that works for you quite well. Maybe that's your book in the future, is
my memoirs.
From your memoirs, from the frying pan to the fire.
Major record label, We Chef.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
please. On order, one major record.
But just take us through. So, how did that song come together? Because it's a great track. It's an amazing hook, and it is a track that, rightly as that person said, no one knows. Will Manning says no one knows his face,
and they still don't.
But honestly, that's honestly true, because even when I say to people now, oh, there's this guy, Samuel Jack, he's coming on the pod, and he's a great songwriter, and da 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 da. Yeah, and they go, who is that? And you go, Feels Like Summer, and they go, oh man, that song.
Yeah, it's mad. It's an anomaly, that song, and I'll tell you why. It's actually, I find it really fascinating. And it's a really good anecdote for our industry now. It really is, just the whole process of it. So the truth of it is that what went viral was the hook of the song, right? And the hook of the song is an instrumental it's a trumpet line, and it's a one-line hook. It just goes, and it feels like summer. That's the chorus of the song. It's a trumpet melody and the hook. What went viral was the trumpet and that one line. What didn't go viral was the artist, me. And that is reflected. Obviously in my streaming numbers, it's been reflected brilliantly. But in terms of my social media and stuff, what me and incidentally a major record label couldn't do was navigate those millions and millions and millions of people globally back to the artist. And it's a really fascinating thing. When I think about it, if you take artists like Kieran DeCrow, he had a viral song, but what went viral for him was a full chorus of a lyric and his vocal. And I'd argue that the reason that people went back to him was because they heard his voice, they heard him sing, they heard more of the story, there was more lyric to it. So I think it's actually something really interesting, sort of, I don't know whether you'd call it scientifically, but if you really dial down onto what was it that made that song go viral, On top of that, this feels like summer's a vibe. It's a summer song. It's very niche. It can be used all the time. Right now it's summer in Australia. It's being picked up a lot there.
But didn't I would kind of liken this a little bit. Early days Becky Hill was a voice, but she wasn't an artist, and I think merged more into the dance space, even to the degree that last year she won the Brit Award for Best Dance Act.
Yeah,
I think it was, and I don't know. It's just an interesting area because, of course, now all of her songs are disconnect. It's always this one hooks.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just wonder if we're getting better at it now. But that problem that you had was at a really interesting time. What year was that?
That it went off.
Went viral. Yeah,
it was 22.
22, I think it was. I think 22.
22, yeah,
but it'd been out a little while before that, hadn't it? And
yeah,
I don't know if, and this is getting on to streaming and a slightly different lane here, but artists have this ongoing challenge, I think, which is you've got streams and you've got UGC content, which this track is a UGC dream. Okay, it's connecting, people are sharing it, it's doing its own thing. But then how do you bring this back to the business? How do you actually monetize it outside of that? Now, we'll talk a little bit about sync in a bit as well, because I think that is a hugely misunderstood in the industry. And look, you're an absolute expert in this area, and we definitely need to talk about it. But I do wonder if you were kind of almost a victim of the time where people didn't, because I think it's a new thing, this whole idea of building a fan base through very technical CRMs. I was talking on a podcast, one of our earlier guests was talking about CRMs and these technical solutions to herd communities. 2022, we were kind of still not quite there. We weren't we were just at the tail end of working it out. We just got off the back of COVID. COVID literally only ended in 22. So we were still kind of just trying to work it out. We were still bandaging up the wounds of the music industry, which were hemorrhaging all over the place. And, there was no amount of bandages, it seemed at the time, was going to repair that. And a lot of things got lost over that period. You talked about a live show that you lost, and many, many, many bands lost big, big live shows during that period because of COVID. So maybe a victim of the time, but what a huge success. Tens of millions of streams. This isn't, a couple of little streams here and there. This is tens of millions of streams. And I think, I'm sure you're very, very proud of that song, even though, I don't know how long that song took you to write. How long did it take?
Do you know what? It was one of the short ones.
Yeah?
Yeah, it really was. So
end to end, how to write a global smash hit took you...
It actually took me about under half an hour, that one.
There you go. There's your cookery show. Global hits in under 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's a real simple one. It's often the way, it's very, very simple,
Can't write, won't write. I kind of feel like we could
kind of do... we can do that. It was very simple to write. I did it in about half an hour. I remember sending a voice note to my guys in America. I thought, what do you think of this? And I remember the voice note. I've still got it somewhere on my phone, I think. And he came back. And Owen, it takes him a lot to get, super excited. But when you do something good, if Owen's excited about something, you're on the right track.
Okay.
And he just sent me his voice note back and was like, "Oh, this could work." And I was like, "Oh, I know, right?" And then we had a couple of back and forths on some creative things, and before you know it, and do you know what? We released it on a whim. We released it in 2019, and it wasn't until 2-3 years later that it did anything. And we just went, do you know what? We should put out something light and summery and fun. And there you go.
And that leads us very, very lovely. It's an incredible segue into sync, because I think with sync, and for those listeners that maybe are casual industry people that are just interested, sync is when you get your music placed on a big show. I'm using that as one example. Sync is kind of attaching your music to any type of creative, actually. But imagine when you're watching Sex Education and that song comes on at the beginning of that show and you kind of hear the song, or Grey's Anatomy was a classic of this, had soundtrack after soundtrack. Love Island, another classic example of song plays, people listen to it. And so that's kind of what a sync is. In its sort of crudest sense. But I guess it'd be great to hear from your perspective, because a lot of artists listening to this, I know we work with artists all the time, and they are pretty much obsessed with this idea of sync. I want my song featured on FIFA 25. I want my song featured on Love Island. How do I do it? Who are the gatekeepers? How do I do it? Because everyone thinks that that's their rainbow. That's the gold chest at the end of the rainbow.
Sure.
That's the thing that's going to sustain them. Now, you've had an incredible amount of success in sync, somewhat spearheaded by the success of this track, but also from your own work as a songwriter and a collaborator. So it'd be great to just hear from your perspective, from a slightly more industry side, I guess, of what are the best practices around sync if you're an artist?
Yeah, the advantages of sync are this. I mean, one, obviously you get paid, which you don't very often in the music industry. And two, it sort of gives you a humongous audience. So historically speaking, I think I've done nearly 100 syncs over the last sort of 6-7 years.
100 syncs?
Yeah.
Wow.
Pushing that. Don't quote me. And the most successful ones haven't necessarily been the big budget ones, but they've been ones that have been on popular TV shows. And then what happens is you can sort of cross-pollinate, as I'd maybe suggest, audiences. And it's amazing for discovery. So, for example, I don't know, recently, a couple of weeks ago, I did a spot on Tulsa King, which is a Paramount thing with Sylvester Stallone. And, you know, I'd envisage that if you're a super fan of Tulsa King, you listen to it and you go, oh, I wonder what that song, that's a great song, I wonder what that is. And then you go on the internet and you find it. So what I do is if I have a crossover song, so a song that's a Samuel Jackson song, which is going to be on TV and film, I then either release the song or put it on put it everywhere, put it on YouTube, the audio on YouTube, and blah, blah, blah. The amount of discovery I've had via that has been insane.
On YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube.
Because it's very interesting to say that, and I'm sorry, just not to cut in there, but what's fascinating is obviously I worked in TV myself for a long time. And when I used to sit in the edit rooms with the producers, it was not even unusual that they would put the screen, as you imagine they've got a couple of screens, they'd put one screen over here with the piece, with the edit, and the bit they want to find some music for. And on the other screen, they get YouTube up. And they literally type in, this is the power of keywords, right? They would type in dark, gloomy rap, and then it will spring up a bunch of suggestions. And sometimes they're from big artists, sometimes from small artists. They'll press play on YouTube and run the scene over here. Or maybe they've got an idea in their head of a track. Maybe it's an Ed Sheeran track or a Stormzy track or whatever. And they'll put it on YouTube and they'll play it over the top. Because that's the crudest way and the quickest way to do it. And then what they'll do is they'll tell the researcher, oh, can you go and find this track for us? We want to license it. Because they've just found it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then that person would go and speak to a publisher, and the publisher would go, you know, oh, it's going to cost you whatever, £10,000 for a 30-second usage over a 12-month period of time or whatever. Yeah. And then you go back to the budget, and the budget goes, we can't quite afford Rag and Bone Man Human, but do you have like a, you know, I don't know, billion...
A Samuel Jack.
A Samuel Jack version of it, you know, or sort of similar vibe. And that's what they would do, and that's when a sync agency would get involved, or maybe they would reach out to someone that they know. More often than not, and this is the scary fact here, is the friend of the producer or the friend of the editor will just divert to their own friend's music that someone sent them personally.
Yeah.
And use that because they don't have the budget, so they'll just use their friends. And it's quite opportunistic. But this whole thing about YouTube, I think, is massive. And I think artists need to really... I think what you just said there is absolutely something artists should think about. Keywords and putting it on YouTube, even as an instrumental, even as an audio, just put it on your YouTube channel.
All my audio, everything I release goes on there for sure. Yeah. Even unreleased music.
Oh wow, okay.
But for the reason, you know, and this is the thing. This is a slightly broader conversation, but you know, I see it as a whole ecosystem. If you're independent, and the way that I work is with, you know, the independent model that, you know, on an independent label essentially, a very small team of people. You have control over this, right? So let's say I had a song on. There's a police drama in America called The Rookie. I've had multiple songs on it.
Have you? I mean, I literally watch The Rookie all the time.
Yeah, I've had 4 or 5 in there. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Okay, great.
Listen out, and so I'll, you know, then I'll put the audio, even if it's unreleased on YouTube. Then all the mega Rookie fans will, you know, visually Shazam it or something. They go, where can I find this song? They might go onto YouTube to discover the song.
Yeah.
They then find the song. If I get enough people on the song, you know, on that clip on YouTube, and it's usually just the title, you know, or something, and it's just playing the audio. If you get enough people going, you know, is this song on Spotify? Can I get it? Then if you're independent, you can go, yeah, right, I'll release it.
Yeah.
And out it goes. And there are so many advantages to that, and it's similar. as you were mentioning about publishers and stuff in sync, the way that I've worked with my team over the last few years is I'm unpublished. I control my own publishing. So we operate on a small team basis with a couple of different boutique sync agencies around the world territorially. And that's just, it's a huge advantage because one, you know, again, like you're dealing with a smaller team of people, which means you have more attention on you. You have a relationship with them and they back you. So the guys we work with in Los Angeles, we've been with for years, and they know you and they know your catalogue, and they advise, you know, they give you some A&R notes maybe on what they, you know, might think creatively speaking could help the song and so on. Whereas if you're on a major publisher, for example, which has got its advantages as well, you know, often what will happen is it's what we call one stop, right? So often what will happen is if you're published and I don't know, Thompson Holidays hear your song on YouTube and they go, oh, I want to get that on my car advert or whatever. They'll go to your publisher and say, hey, can we, or your label even, the sync department, and just say, oh, can we clear this? And then, you know, there's this huge label and then it's got to be passed around a few different people before they can go, oh yeah, we can, but we have to just check the budget on that. Like, can we have this much money for it, blah, 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 blah. And often like sync is quite fast moving. Like, you know, they want it on the picture. They want the right sound on the picture as quickly as they can to see if it works, to get that wrapped.
And that's a great bit of advice. I mean, I worked in sync myself for a little bit, and this term one stop comes up all the time. And I think artists often get a bit confused by one stop. I think publishing just generally and knowing your rights can be quite confusing anyway. But let's just come back to that point. And again, I'm conscious this isn't the kind of podcast where we go into the right technical details of all of these things.
Sure, yeah.
This is nerd alert. But it's more just thinking about kind of just how it works. And within sync, this idea of one stop simply means the person who wrote this track and composed this track is able to sign off on this track.
Can clear it, yeah, 100%.
Can clear it, which means that if you want to use it, all you got to do is ask me.
Just reply and be like, yeah.
You've literally got to go to one stop. That one stop is me. It becomes far more complicated, and you can, you know, tell me your view on this. In my experience, it becomes more complicated when you start having more songwriters involved in that process, or if there's a sync approval component to it that's a bit different. So if there are additional people involved in a song, then there's a sync approval process, which basically means that, you know, it could be an ethical thing, right, or a moral thing where, you know, I don't want to use, you know, maybe your song has been put forward for a lovely sync in a hardcore pornographic movie.
Right, yeah.
But
I actually don't specialise in that area myself. But
No. But, you know, feels like summer. No, I don't know. But what I mean is that if morally or ethically one of the writers actually objects to the usage of that song for whatever values, beliefs, or just, you know, whatever reason they have, they can go, no, they have power of veto, which is where the problem comes in with sync, because then when you're trying to sign something off, one stop is king. And I've heard that phrase said many times, one stop is king. And it's what it is. One stop is agile. One stop is quick. It means your opportunity as an artist, and you know this, and it sounds like you smashed this, because the opportunity, the window of opportunity is often quite small, because it's all about time, speed, quick. Now we've got this amount of money. Do you want it? Do you want it? Do you want it? Do you want it? You know, and we've had artists turned down for sync agencies who've just gone, it's great, love the music, brilliant music. It's got 8 songwriters. Yeah, we have to do a separate contract for every single one of them.
Sure, it is a lot more complicated. Again, like I've had a lot of really good guidance for so many years. I've literally learnt from. I was very, very lucky, and I feel, you know, very, very grateful every day to have had firsthand, you know, really the best sort of coaches on this sort of front. Like I've worked with them on it and seen it happen. I've fielded the calls, seen the emails, I've been in the trenches with them on it. But, you know, really pertinent to what we're just saying, even very recently, a good example of this is we were trying to clear something for a BBC spot, and there was 2 other writers on it. One of them unpublished, clear it. The other one is, in her eyes, was like, yeah, of course, clear it. I mean, you know, more often than not, writers don't apply. You know, it's very rare that a writer says, "Oh no, I don't want to do that," because they're getting money to pay off their advance or go get their advance or whatnot. But because she was on a major publisher, so she was on a major publisher and he wasn't, and I'm not. So we're like, yeah, cool, just do it now if you want. But then, you know, you then got to go, oh, okay, she's on a major. And then it actually, as it turned out, well, there was lots of other things going on with that, but it's a whole other layer.
So they tend to. I don't know that bit, and I want the people listening would understand that, because unpublished, major published. Do they then add in more layers, or would they try and negotiate a higher fee because they take a percentage, or how would that side work? Not getting too nerdy about it, but just in a really simplistic term.
That's a good question. I think they would. They could.
Right.
But you'd like to think that they wouldn't, because it's getting a sync is great, is amazing. It's only positive. Like unless it's like if it was a record label sync department, it's just like one of their big artists. Hard one to call that. I'd say that it's. You'd hope that they wouldn't. It's
definitely relative to the artist, isn't it? Surely.
Yeah,
if Ed Sheeran's getting a sync somewhere and he's got 9 writers, the publisher as a team is going to work very hard to get that cleared and put a nice big chunky fee attached to it.
Yeah, and it's reflected in the budget, those things. I mean, it's huge,
But if you're an indie artist, that you don't have necessarily that privilege to do so. So, brilliant career so far, and there's so much more to come, of course, right? And you're an expert in sync, and you're doing some incredible things. And 100 syncs, like that's brilliant. Surely now it's 1,000. The next big milestone is 1,000 syncs.
I hope so, mate. That'd be nice. Yeah.
Come on, let's go for it.
Pay the mortgage.
Yeah. Well, I told you, it feels like winter. I mean,
I'm on it.
We've got to keep this track rolling all year round,
like spring.
Right? Yeah. But seriously though, so we're going to talk a little bit about the wider industry, and I think you have a really unique perspective because you've been major label signed. You know many parts of the industry quite intimately too, and you've had some great coaches and mentors over the years, which is absolutely brilliant. And I always say to artists, a coach or a mentor, definitely, if they're great at what they do and they can just guide you along the way, do it. It's so important. Getting that little nuance of the music industry so early on in your career, I'm sure it sounds like you've really benefited from that.
For sure.
And I think other artists out there do that. I do that from a business mentor point of view. I still get mentored. Yes, I'm a fossil, but I want to learn and grow as well. And I think it's important everyone has that. But let's talk about the industry. So, in your opinion, what emerging trend or technology in the industry is currently really exciting you? That's making you think, okay, we're in 2025 and things are starting to get a bit serious.
I think excite and strike me with a fear of God. It has to be AI. I think just in that, I think if used correctly, I mean, God, we could talk about this for hours, but if used correctly, I think AI can be, taken advantage of in terms of things like marketing, social media planning, content creation, or management, things like that, which are essentially freeing up time for people that just want to sit in their bedroom and write music. It's help. It's it's legitimate help.
Yeah.
Most of the time. I mean, I don't use AI on a day-to-day basis, but I do have friends that are starting to use it, incorporate it way more in things like marketing plans and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I think you can only do so much with these things. Yeah. But in terms of helping people that are just starting out, just like some of the jargon and things, type into your chat GBT, write me a 4-week social media example, give me 4 weeks of social media content examples, the sort of things I should be doing, and it'll list it off to you like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think there's there has to be the expertise and knowledge and wisdom going alongside it if possible. But if you don't have those things, and that kind of excites me, just in that it's more tools. There's more tools to get our art out, right?
And I guess the risk associated with that is ChatGPT is essentially crowdsourcing people's data.
Yeah.
Okay. So if 1,000 artists type in exactly the same thing, can you write me 10 example, 10 social media posts? Kind of all getting the same one,
exactly, right? Exactly. And I do agree. And I think there are some negatives as well. I think it's good to begin sort of people that are just starting out get their brains functioning in that way. I think if anything like that can help, just tools to help you. But it's part of a broader picture. The more we use AI, and like you say, the more that we're all doing the same thing. Say we use AI to grow our fan base. Then all of a sudden, and this leads me on to something else actually. But say we all use AI and we all grow our fan base, and we grow our fan base to 100. We've all got 100,000 followers. Me and Steve next door, who just plays a Wonderwall continually in his bedroom. He's got 100,000 followers now because he's used AI or tools to help him get there. So have I, but I'm like a proper musician, singer songwriter, whatever. If we've all got the followers and we're all influencers, then what really matters? What is it that really matters? And of course, what I'm most passionate about and what really, really matters to me is community building. It's like, numbers. I'm digressing slightly, but it's in the same under the same umbrella. Numbers are a vanity thing for me. I've got friends that have got smaller followership than me, but have a better engaged community, or not just me. Other comparatively to other artists, like you can have 20,000 fans on your page that every single one of them is buying a ticket to your show, buying a T-shirt. More than most. Buying a T-shirt, downloading your music, showing up. And you can have 50,000 followers that just don't really look at your posts and don't really care.
Not all audiences are created equal.
Yeah. So I think AI excites me, and that you're like, oh, I wonder what other cool stuff we can do with this. At the same time, it does sort of make me think. Eventually, then, if these tools get so efficient at doing things like growing fan bases, what does it all mean?
Well, I mean, is AI the death of creativity and the rebirth of mediocrity? I don't know.
Quite, and I completely know what you're saying. It's just sometimes I see something like an AI thing. Like I use the one way that I use AI in my day to day is on content. If I get images made to help me connect a song to an audience. So, for example, I've got a song. This morning, I think I might posted something. I've got a song called "Home to You," which is a song about getting home to your loved ones. And I asked AI to design me 4 pictures in an impressionist Monet style that reflects this, and the other, and it pops up. And it's kind of cool content like that. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a little kid in me. I don't know, but also at the same time, maybe we're in the Matrix, Mark. Who knows? Maybe we are.
Well, in the Matrix. Look, is it any different to when fossils like myself didn't have the internet and we'd have an encyclopedia?
Exactly.
Right. So it's just, I had a book that I'd go to and look up, all the different letters. Okay, what is a velociraptor? Let's have a little look in the encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Okay, right. It's and so then the internet was born and went, you kind of don't need books anymore. We can now present an entire new veneer of knowledge for you.
Right.
You've got, imagine having 20 million books on your shelf. That's what you've got now. Great. But now the next step is almost like, well, imagine if you didn't even necessarily need to read any of those books or type anything into the internet. You could just get someone else to do it for you.
It just takes a romance out, doesn't it, as well? It really does. Just take the, oh, God, it makes me feel like a robot or something.
Yeah, well, I think if you can get AI to, wash your car for you on a Sunday and do some of those jobs.
Write me a top 10 here, it'd be nice.
Yeah, but then everyone's going to say write me a top 10 hit.
Let's not even go.
And suddenly we've got feels like summer, track 1, 2, 3, and 10. But I think it is terrifying, AI, and it's also super exciting. And I mentioned this before about how Bowie would look at AI, and I think we're still scratching the surface, but I think we're getting better at understanding where it sits in our current worldview. And I guess we'll see where it lands. I mean, look, you're an artist, a songwriter, you work in sync, and I've seen AI work in sync particularly well for catalog search, where you can put reference tracks in. I was very, very lucky to work with a company called Feed Forward AI, and I was developing a software catalog tool where you could give it a track, say Rag and Bowman Human, puts it into its system, and it deep dives a 500,000 deep catalog and surfaces every track that sounds like that.
Right.
Now, if you're a creative sync manager, and your entire job is predicated on you understanding that library, then I've just solved that problem for you in 5 seconds. Now, that tool's out there. Audio Network use it. I think it's called Figaro in their context. I'm not entirely sure. Don't quote me on that. But, I was involved in that, and I saw that in 2018. That was 2018. That was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And now where are we at? Faster computers, more knowledge, more data. Where does that end? Well, it solved a problem, and it did solve a massive problem, which has actually unlocked way more money for artists.
Right.
So I think things just move around is kind of what I guess.
For sure.
We'll see. I mean, are we even here? You're right. I don't know if we'll get unplugged soon.
There is no spoon, isn't that the line from Matrix?
That's right, yeah. But if I suddenly wake up naked in an egg somewhere, I'm going to be freaking the hell out. So, but, feel completely validated. So tell me a little bit about, we're sort of getting to the business end of this now.
Oh,
that was accidental, but I like it. I'll roll with it. But what do you think the biggest challenge in the music industry is right now?
My prediction for the music industry in the next few years is that I think we're going to see more and more operations on an independent, independently. Again, without repeating myself, the independent model. I think there's going to be more and more major labels that are turning back to that formula, if you will. And I think what's going to be a challenge actually is for the wide, and I'm not just talking about creatives. I mean, I think in the widest sense is how to navigate going from the old school to the new. And I know that sounds very sort of wide, but I mean, like, right now, big major labels, I've got friends that work at labels that are being, losing their jobs and stuff, and all the money's being moved around, and it's, radio pluggers are disappearing, and all the money's being put into digital and content creation. And I think what's going to be most difficult is, from a business sense, is major labels and our industry moving from that major label old school thing back to where we are starting to arrive at now. Live music, I think that's something that I fear for.
Hey, look, we're only one more pandemic away from it going completely, in my opinion, and I think that's a really interesting thing. And who knows how many more of these we're going to have in years to come as the population increases and all sorts of crazy things. But we don't know. You and I are mere cogs in this wheel of life, right? And so, we're not in charge here, but we can control what we're in, our immediate kind of thoughts and stuff. So, but let's talk about, the industry. You wake up tomorrow morning, imagine this. You wake up tomorrow morning with your little magic wand, and you can change one thing about the industry. You have one wish. What's the one thing you would change about the music industry?
Points. Master points for writers. Yeah, 100%.
I'm assuming more.
Yeah, but more.
Is this a bit like what Ray was talking about?
Yeah, who's an amazing advocate and an ambassador for us writers. I mean, like, think of it this way. I'll be called by a management company or a label or an artist, and they'll say, "Hey, do you want to do a write? Do you want to come write with me? Yeah, grand. And I'll, as a writer, as a co-writer, I'll look at the project and be like, oh, it's exciting. They've got some stuff going on, or they, even if they don't, I might just love the music or whatever. Yeah, great. I'd love to do a write with you. See if we can do some sync, or maybe you'll release it, and So I get up and I go, all right, cool. When are we doing the session? And they say, oh, I'm not really sure. Have you got any, recommendations? Or they might not, but let's just say they don't. I go, okay, no problem. And I'll give a couple of my producers, like my network, a call. But hey guys, look, I've got this guy or girl that really wants to get in the room and get a couple of demos done. Like, if you fancy it, yeah, great. I fancy it's brilliant. All right, mate. And so I'll do a bit of admin and I'll book the studio with them, and I'll get the room with the producer. I'll then travel to the session, and then I'll sit at the back of the room with the artist, and I'll talk to the artist and say, oh yeah, so what we're writing about today. Like, sometimes they're very clear on that. Other times artists don't really know, and we'll write a song together with the producer. And so there's three of us in the room, and we'll talk about splits probably before the session, but sometimes after. Write the song, and I've had a big input in writing it. Sometimes I haven't, but more often than not, you split a song equally in terms of publishing, your writers. And then I leave and I go home, and I've spent 20 quid on getting there or whatever. I've bought them a cup of coffee or whatever. I've gone home, so I'm like 30 quid down for the day or whatever it is, which isn't much, but it all adds up. You don't go home and you've agreed that you take your 30% on the publishing. Then the artist says to the producer, I love this song, I want to release it. They then pay the producer, who's also written on it, so it's got writing credit, which is fine. They pay the producer, rightly so. They pay the producer a fee for the, either for the day or for the master if they're on a label. Obviously, there's lots of, it's multifaceted, this sort of thing. But so they pay a producer, or the label pays the producer a fee for the master. The producer's been paid. The producer's also got his percentage for the writing. The master recording rights are split between the producer and the artist. And if we're lucky as songwriters, we've kept our 33.3% of the publishing from the thing. If we're lucky, we'll get some writers' points. That shouldn't be the case, in my opinion. I think there should be some, like, as to echo what Ray's so formidably doing now. There should be some kind of, particularly when you're working with majors. I mean, majors are
Do you think songwriters
the banks full of money?
Are songwriters completely devalued?
I mean, maybe. And I think, a day rate or just a bit of money to and maybe I'm just being romanticising it. I don't know, maybe I'm just being naive, but a bit of money, if you're working, writing for a major label artist, and you go, I've just written you a monster, and then it goes on to be a hit, and you've got your 33% of your publishing. You're just sort of going, pay me a bit of money just to be there, please. Any chance you could pick lunch up?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not something you'd see in other industries, is it? It's not like, I don't know, plumbing's a bit of a weird one to use there.
No,
but, it's still a job. You've still spent your time. You could have been doing other things, earning money in other ways, but you've on a whim gone to write with someone in the hope that it actually becomes something. And I think prospecting as a general thing is a great thing, but I get it. And I hope people listening kind of get it too, that the way that music is divvied up between publishing and master and producer and songwriter and musicians as well and performers, it's quite complicated is the truth. And sure. You're right. And from my experience, and obviously Ray, as you rightly say, has been a massive advocate for this, but other songwriters now coming out saying the same thing, that we're nowhere near as valued as we should be, in the same way that a producer is held in this kind of high esteem of a highly skilled person that knows how to use a mixing desk and mix a song and produce it all and mic it up correctly, whatever, record it correctly. Whereas a songwriter's like, they just come up with some words. It's like, yeah, I agree. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous notion that someone sitting here with tens of millions of streams might go and travel to the arse end of nowhere on the promise that it might be a hit.
I mean, that's why we're all mad. That's art, I suppose. But yes, I mean, I completely agree. And I just think, where possible, and we're not talking about silly money here. We're talking about just a bit of money. Can you just cover my time for the day? Like, just, when you're working with artists on labels, which are full of money, pretty much. I work a lot in Nashville and Los Angeles, and in my eyes, Nashville is, it's the home of songwriting. I'm out there a couple of times a year. And I recently did a co-write with a friend of mine called Melissa, who, in my eyes, is just, top tier talent, amazing lyricists, just, and we were working out the splits and stuff after the session and whatever. And I just dropped a message and just said, put some, because it was an artist thing for me. And I, put some master points aside for, a good amount. And she thanked, she was just like, oh my God, thanks so much, for doing that. It's a really, and I was like, no. Like, it's I'm surprised that she shouldn't be thanking me. It should just be a normal thing. I think. Agree. There's got to be, I don't know, some kind of, and I'm no expert on this, but just some kind of, I don't know, base level income for songwriters. I mean,
we saw a little bit of this mentality in radio and TV when I worked in radio and TV. It's different, but the same, i.e. people would get paid a lot less to be on radio because the assumption was that you should be grateful to be given this platform. And people getting paid silly money to travel big distances to go to a studio to record a 1 hour show that required many hours beforehand of prep and travel, and then many hours afterwards of laying the show down
and a lifetime
and
of
promotion.
Experience. And a lifetime of experience.
And they're getting paid, whatever, silly money to do so. So I get it. There we go. That's what you change. You're out there fighting the good fight with Ray. So, I feel like a Ray and Sam and Jack.
Ray, if you're listening, I love you. I love you.
Yeah, Ray, come on. Pull your finger out.
Let's
and get this. Get this Feels Like Summer 2025 out there and stop messing about, okay? So look, just a few more questions and look, thank you so much for your time today. It's really great in this kind of environment where we can talk to an artist that is doing it, has been on the major label trail, has been signed, has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and can probably make a mean egg sandwich, which
only the best, Mark.
Oh, I'm sure, and I'm going to tap you up for that, especially with this new format that we're working on called Can't Write, Won't Write, because we need to take that from the chef to from the restaurant to the studio. So I think there's many things in the industry that, let's be honest, it's all a bit gnarly, isn't it? It's all a bit gnarly, but a couple of very quick questions. Quick tip: artists that maybe are struggling with their mental health in the industry. One quick tip that maybe, I'm sure you've gone through stuff. I think the industry is like no other industry. Let's be honest, it's completely fucked up. But you're working with creative individuals. And so what would be one tip maybe that you've employed yourself or that you have granted onto others just to keep yourself in check?
Yeah, to keep myself in check is to continually remind myself that we're all in the same boat. We're all doing the same thing. Like, you know, the weight of social media, for example, and the way that your views and likes can, you know, literally scientifically affect your mood. You know, if you're posting something and no one's reacting to it, you know, we're all doing that. And to remind myself that there's so many other indies, you know, that are out there fighting the good fight and don't always get the, you know, the reward that they deserve. I think that always comforts me. I'm just like, you know, okay, cool. So I put a video out and not many people watched it or liked it today, for example. It's all right. I'm sure there's thousands of people that, you know, haven't. I think it's always, and to never compare yourself to anybody else. You know, and most importantly, just concentrate on your songs. You know, I just think I'm a real advocate for that. And you know, you're only, a wise man once told me, you're only as good as your songs, and I think that is the true currency when you break everything down and, you know, concentrate on your songs, concentrate on the art, and I think the rest of it comes. Yeah,
and we hear that with social media, and you know, I guess we've had quite a lot of guests, and a lot of people are starting to say, actually, social media, you know, it's great, but it's also pretty terrible for the mind. And artists now coming out like Chapel Rowan, who I feel like I name check every time, but they're starting to say, hey, look, we need boundaries. Sure. We need boundaries. Boundaries are important. You know, we're not always on. And the social media expectation is that you are always on. And, you know, I think it's quite refreshing that we're starting to see artists say, hey, look, hold on, we're going to fight for our rights as songwriters, but also as people.
Yeah.
As people.
I mean, it's all encompassing. I mean, it's literally, I mean, it takes up so much time and so much energy. And, you know, that on my social media, I try my absolute best to just, I am completely 100% myself at all times.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to take a break from these things, but just, you know, you just got to keep an eye on yourself. You've got to keep an eye on yourself. You know, be mindful, take breaks. You don't owe anyone anything. If you don't post for a couple of days, you don't post for a couple of days. You know, the world's not going to end. Just, you know, keep cracking on and balance. Try and find it.
I think the industry is like that. And the next question here is around streaming services. And there certainly was, you know, whether or not they've had a positive or negative experience on the music industry. And just to jump on the back of that last point you was making about this idea of relentless releasing and relentless posting and relentless engagement, and everything's relentless. But who started that narrative? And I kind of thinking, I'm not by any way going 2-footed in on Spotify or streaming services here, but
I do, go on.
I can't help feeling, studs up. Vinnie Jones, 1992 kind of tackle, you know, first 20 seconds of a game, bang, like, you know, let them know you're there. But streaming services, I think there was definitely a time where we kept hearing artists come to us and say, we've got to release a song every 3 or 4 weeks. That's what Spotify want. And it created this just unrealistic bar. And I think it actually lowered the quality of music because people are having to churn things out more quickly. But without going too much into my opinion on this, I'd love to just hear from you just quickly, you know, streaming services, have they had a positive or negative effect on the industry?
I think you look at it two ways. I think on the positive side, streaming means that anyone can put their music out. You know, my next door neighbour, Lynn, if she wanted to write a song and record it and put it out into the world, she can. We've never really been able to do that, you know, before these sort of stuff. You know, it's that easy. I think that the negative things kind of speak for themselves. I mean, the thing that I always remember, and I saw it somewhere recently, was it was online. There was a guy that I follow who was holding a T-shirt, one of his merch T-shirts. And he just said, isn't it amazing that buying one of these is like listening to my song 15,000 times. So I just think it's kind of, you know, a bit cloak and dagger. And, you know, again, it's a bit of a vanity thing. I just think, you know, streams, schmemes. I mean, obviously for me, it's the streaming is my metric, you know, for success. It is really, or it's seen as the metric for success. And that can be really toxic mentality to get into. Sure. Like it's you know, success is what you make it. You know, to me, success is, you know, I say this regularly, is waking up in the morning and you know, doing something that you truly love. That's to me, that's what success is. I don't need Spotify to tell me otherwise. But you know, I think it's at an equally equally positive and negative impacts to our industry.
Yeah, and I saw something the other day, and it was, it was like this whole idea of I spend £1,500 on a marketing campaign, to attract whatever it was, 1,000 streams to earn $4. And I remember I saw that stat the other day, and I thought, yeah, something's got to change there, right? Something's got to change. So look, final couple of questions, because again, thank you so much for your time. It's been really cool.
Loved it. I could talk your ears off all day, Mark.
Oh really? Okay,
sorry,
good.
I'm a bit of a music dweeb. I am. I just love it.
Oh, music dweeb. Well, that'll be for volume 2 of the chat. I'll go into proper dweebsville. So look, just crystal ball. Where do you see the music industry in 10 years' time?
Much like I was just saying, I see it turning into much more of an independent vibe. I feel like there'll be more, there'll be a lot more smaller independent labels offering a broader range of services. Yeah, in a nutshell. That's
okay. So you just think it's going to completely change and be fully democratized, almost independent led.
I think major labels even now, they're like VCs. I mean, they're banks. They've got a lot of money, and I think there's certainly an argument. There are some positive things about doing major record label deals. It can be, reach territorially. They've got armies of people and teams of people in different territories that can open up different markets for you, for sure. But I do believe that you can still achieve that independently via clever marketing, via geo-targeting, ad spend correctly, all part of a strategic, wider tactical approach to how you release music. And in my opinion, those major labels are literally going to turn even further into, investors than they are,
and be more risk averse. I would imagine too.
Yeah, for sure.
Much more about the numbers, and then numbers being real numbers. And we often say, Dragon's Den or Shark Tank. If you're listening from America, we always often think that's a very sobering show, because you are now an independent business and you're trying to build value and margin and profitability and forecasting forwards about what you're going to spend and make. And it's definitely turning that way, but there's always that moment of virality, as you've experienced, that unknown quantity that is the audience out there that go, I just fucking love this now.
Yeah.
And you go, well, great. It's really hard for me to forecast that.
Yeah.
So it's not going into my forecast for the 2026 budget, but if I do happen to go viral, brilliant. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with that when it happens. So look, our final question is a question we ask everyone, and really the purpose of this podcast really is to try and give the audience just some little insight into our world, and sometimes that's best articulated from a piece of advice you've had along the way.
That's an easy one for me, there
we go. Right, so this bit of advice is just something that really helped shape your mentality with regards to your career, maybe even personally too. And if you could share that, because people listening, hopefully it helps them as well.
Best piece of advice I ever got was from a chap called Brian, who's a very successful guy in the music industry. He's a manager. He managed an amazing band for a long time called Fits and the Tantrums. I'm not sure if he still does. And now I think he works with Guns N' Roses to some capacity. I'm not sure. I haven't spoken to him for a while. Hi, Brian. But we were really drunk at a wedding once. Best conversations always happen then. Mm-hmm. And I was in a bad place. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know. I had all this music, and I felt like I was pretty decent. I just wanted some people to listen to my music. And we were drinking whiskey, and we were at my really good friend's wedding, and I said to him, he's a perfect example of someone that's gone. He started or had his success relatively late, and then has had amazing success. And I said to him, I was just like, give me one piece of advice. Like, what is it? And it's stuck with me ever since. And he just said, it's really easy. And I was like, all right. He's like, just perseverance. I was like, all right, all right then. And then the more you think about that, what really defines you from the next person is just perseverance.
Yeah.
And you, I'm sure you've heard people like Ed Sheeran mention this a lot. That I was not blessed with an incredible God-given talent. Absolutely wasn't. I have continually showed up, continually sponged off people. I've never ever assumed that I'm the cleverest guy in the room, because the moment that you do that is the moment that you're not. Mm-hmm. I've listened continually and just tried to pick up literally as much as I can, and carried on. So this is, it really affected my life personally as well, because I started quite late through the times where all my mates are getting married and having kids, and doing really adult stuff. I'm living in a caravan, which I haven't even touched on, which I know we've run out of time now, but I lived in a caravan for nearly 10 years on and off, whilst I was touring and stuff to make it work, working in the restaurant. Whilst they're all doing that, I'm going, no, I want to do music, please. Music is great. I used to have people pop their head in the kitchen at the restaurant and be like, from Dorset, all right, mate, how's the music going then? Like this to me. As you can see, Steve, not very well, but perseverance, and it's so true. And don't get me wrong, I'm still persevering today. I'm still learning today. I'm not talking to you like I've arrived at some sort of amazing, successful spot. I've done a lot in my career that I'm really proud of, but 100% continuing to strive, for more.
Yeah, I think that's such a brilliant thing that's so underrated, because look, it's not coming to you. If you're waiting for it to come to you, that's going to be a long, long wait.
And fail. Get used to failing. Oh my God, I've failed. I've been rejected and failed on so much stuff. I've sang whole songs in the wrong key at big festivals. I nearly fell off the stage at Glastonbury once. I've got anecdote among anecdote of how things have not gone correctly, but just get up and do it again the next day.
I mean, people who watch this may have gone and checked out the ticket where I talk about artists being serial failures, and I say it's really important that you become a serial failure. That's how you grow, and it's how you learn, and also who you hang around with. Learn from people, be curious, and there's some great books around that. But perseverance, there's been many bands I've had touch points with over the years. And not to make this about my career, but they've got so close to breaking as an artist, but they just run out of money, run out of energy, run out of enthusiasm. Maybe someone gets pregnant. I should say that should stop you, but it can be the moment in life that you kind of go, oh, do I still want to keep living in a caravan with a kid and pursuing a career in the music industry? And I think resilience, perseverance, and that unwavering belief sometimes. I mean, not deluded. If the music's not great, then surely you've heard that at some point along the journey. But
manage those expectations. I think you're right, but I think that the thing that divides is the perseverance, and I think it's whatever your judgment of success is. To me, success is being in an industry that I love and surviving off it. That's my success. Yeah, I love playing live. I love doing all the things that come with it and all that kind of stuff. But just staying there is good for me. I wake up every morning and I'm like, yes. I'm not cooking anymore. I'm writing music. It's brilliant.
And how brilliant is that, Sam? And how brilliant is that? And I think what you just said there is so damn important. If you wake up, you're above ground. That's a good day to start with, isn't it? You're above ground and you're doing something you love. Why would you ever do anything else? But look, thank you so much for your time today. It's been just incredible hearing your journey, and from the depths of South Africa, via Paul Simon into the world of, it's a shame we didn't get so much about the caravan. I'd like to have seen what went on in there. Maybe there was some hilarious anecdotes from that.
A lot happened in the caravan.
To a global smash that, frankly, most artists go their entire career without any morsel of success, and you've already experienced that. But I know you, and I know you want an awful lot more than that, and I can see it coming. 100 sings, millions and millions of streams, right? Don't ever be humble, because you've done some great things, and I'm sure there's a lot more to come. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much. Real pleasure.
Really appreciate it. So thank you very much for listening to the Blind and Talent Music Industry Podcast with Mark Adams. My guest this week was Sam Jack, the wonderful Sam Jack. Catch me again on the next episode, and remember, success leaves clues. Thank you.